Yeah, it's a thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair. I'll take that.
And as a Montrealer, I definitely am calling out that. Yeah.
And you want to be able to make them. You want to be able to mass produce them. So because you've made them in your back, does that mean they are automatically Montreal's bagels? How's it work?
Yeah. Well, okay. I still obviously need to improve my ability to cook them. Don't get me wrong. Okay. So I'm not pretending that I'm an amazing Montreal bagel maker or anything like that. I'm just claiming those bagels are far superior to New York bagels. Yeah.
And that sounds like fighting words.
Yes. Yes. And yes. And for that matter, so is Montreal smoked meat. And yeah, but anyway. So, yes.
Accept it.
So what was I thinking? And then, but so for you, is it, when you say pizza, are you talking Napolitano style, like where it's thin crust? Are you talking one deeper? I'm just curious. What type of pizza
proper,
do you do?
Like make a sourdough dough kind of a couple of days in advance, let it bubble up and do a kind of flaming hot Napoli style pizza. Yeah.
Ah, nice. Okay.
Nice.
Okay. All right.
That sounds great.
That sounds
currently
awesome,
currently do it in the oven, like sort of in a Dutch oven. No, the proper cast iron pan, get the bottom seared, then transfer it onto a pizza stone in the oven. That's just not hot enough. Hence, I need to build a giant fire in my garden.
Yeah, absolutely. That completely unequivocally makes sense to me. Yes. Yeah.
Weirdly, this is my wife's suggestion. No, yes, sorry, carry on. Start things.
No, I was just gonna say I love this talk about pizza. It makes me want to make a pizza in our Dutch oven too. We have one that we do. But anyways, so welcome everyone. So we're live now on YouTube and LinkedIn. So thanks everyone for joining us. We're just getting started here. I think we can maybe wait just a minute or just a couple seconds longer, and then I just have a few intro slides and we'll get started here. Hello, Lucas from Brazil. Joining us on LinkedIn.
I just know somebody actually saying hello from Disney World.
Oh, really? Where?
Yeah, like dag.
Where? I'm missing. On
LinkedIn. Yeah.
I think my feed's lagging a little bit. But
gotcha.
Cool.
I mean, that's definitely something of a flex going, you guys are working, but I'm at Disney World watching you guys.
Exactly. You guys are working so hard presenting a session on lakehouses with Azure Databricks, and here, I'm in Disney World. Good odd flex, but okay. You do you.
I think we should feel also honored that he's listening to our tech talk while he's at Disney World on vacation.
That's true.
That's pretty cool.
True.
Cool. Some folks from Brazil. Somebody else said, I want to be in Disneyland. Yeah, it does sound pretty magical right now. Hello from Jordan.
It's like Disneyland for data, right? That's just, similar.
Oh, there you go. Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get started here. I just have a few intro slides and then we can get to the session. All right, so welcome everyone. This is a tech talk we have this week with Simon and Denny. This is a part 3. They're going to be talking about data transformations into the silver stage of the Delta Medallion architecture. So this live tech talk is part of the Data and AI online meetup group. I'll drop the link in the YouTube and LinkedIn feeds. Love for you to join us there. We have a couple upcoming sessions. That's where we host all of our awesome online events. We have different content, different AMA sessions, different series. So I invite you to check out the group. And then also too, just as a reminder, we put up all our videos on YouTube. So if you'd ever like to revisit a session at a later date, I invite you to join us there. We also stream them live. So I know there's some folks joining us from YouTube, so welcome. But yeah, so lots of ways to join in. And then also too, in the event description, I have the links to part 1 and part 2 of this series in there, and I'll drop those in the chats after I finish my intro slides. And I wanted to do a quick call out. We have a teammate here, Frank. He is a developer advocate based in Europe, and so he's hosting a Slice and Dice Data plus AI Summit kind of recap session in a European friendly time zone. So everybody who's joining from Europe, I hope you attend that session and say hello to Frank. He's super excited. I think this is his first online meetup, so we're excited to have him. And then a quick call out, we have our Data Brew podcast series. So one of the hosts actually is on this call, Denny Lee. They're on their 2nd season, which is super exciting. I think they have a couple sessions up there, and you can get the podcasts wherever they are available. So on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And it looks like first episode was with Matei. So super exciting. And I invite you to check that out when you have some time. I'll also drop that link in the chats. And then last but not least, before I pass it over to our hosts, I wanted to let everyone know that we have a guest blog program. So if you're interested in writing at all, I encourage you to submit your idea and submit. We're welcoming guest blog posts from really anyone who's interested in submitting their project. It goes through, kind of a review process, but if you have an interesting use case or tips and tricks, how-tos or best practices, we want to hear from you. So I will also drop that link, lots of links today. I'll drop that link in the chat spaces, but we'd love to hear from you. And we'll send you some swag if your blog gets published on our blog. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our hosts, Simon and Denny.
Thank you very much. Super happy to be here again with my partner in crime, Simon. Simon, let's think. First things first, should we do a quick review of what we just did? And then do you want to do it? You want me to do it? You up for doing the quick, just explanation? We don't need diagrams or anything. I don't need you to pull out that. Yeah, I'm just no.
I've got the pen ready to go at all times.
If you want to, you can do that because you're better prepared than me. So I've been like that. So
I mean, yeah. Give me a second. I can do a little off the cuff sketch about where we're going, what we've done,
perfect,
where we came
all
from,
right,
why we're here.
Cool. Okay.
Set the scene.
Why we're here. Oh, so you want to go very philosophical now? Just about why we're here.
Why are we here?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. How's that? See the screen? See a whiteboard?
This looks gorgeous.
Amazing. Okay, so if you remember, cast your minds back several weeks, months, some time ago.
Sometime. Just go with that. Go with that.
We had a thing where I built a thing going and talking to, there was the open movie database. So OMDB, and it's built a little thing that goes and scrapes and grabs little bits of JSON. So we have something grabbing some data, going off and fetching it for us, all of that good stuff. And then that goes and pings it over into our thing workspace, into a blob store. So we have like a storage account, which is just receiving lots and lots and lots and lots of little JSON files, which are just talking movie ratings. It's going, well, this is what people thought of this series, of this episode, of this show, all of that kind of stuff, and just teeing it up for us. So that runs every night. That's a hidden away thing in my subscription that just runs and drops this data. And we're treating that a bit like a third party sending us some data. We have no control. We just get sent some data and we're like, cool, let's do a thing. So then over in happy Databricks land, we go. Your new logo is much easier to draw. We've started building a lake, right? So we've got a lake and we said, first zone, let's call it bronze. And we've built something using Autoloader. So Autoloader is the awesome bit of tech that we've got in Databricks to say, just go and look at that storage and just anything I've not read yet. I don't want to have to tell you this file or this particular folder or meet this regex pattern and then match it to a file name. It's just going, just anything I've not read since last time, load that into my table. And so we have a Delta table, which is just the data complete. No, it's got like it. We've included, I think, what the file name that it came from. And that's it. There's no validation. There's no cleansing. There's no row rejection. It is just give me data as it comes, throw it into that table. And the last thing we did, I think we turned on the rescue column. So we're managing schema drift. If anything, if we get any columns that we're not expecting, It'll be like decorated into the end of this table as a little bit of extra stuff. And I think that's where our story ends, right? So we've got a notebook that does this. So that's just a Databricks notebook that whenever we run it, it'll go and do that. And so now we need to think, well, what's next? What's this area? How do we roll? How do we clean the data, validate the data, move on to the next step of our logical processing?
Perfect. That's a wonderful summary. And so just to add some color commentary to go with it. So just as Simon noted, the bronze table is basically where we just dump the data, right? And with minimal to no processing, just like Simon noted, we have the rescue data column because the autoloader says if there's any schema drift, we can put those as additional columns there. And we added like the actual file name, so that way we can figure out where the source of that data came from. All right, perfect. But then now we want to augment it. We want to filter it at minimum, right? We want to be able to cleanse the data. We want to lock the schema of some type. Now, today's session, we're doing this more from a prototype perspective than from a production perspective. So in other words, the code we're about to show you on this notebook is very much like, here's how you do it from a high level, but I wouldn't productionize this yet, okay? We'll do another session for productionizing if you want us to do that, or that's another important call out. When we do these sessions, we are asking you, the audience, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or on Zoom, to tell us, what you want to see next. So right now, for example, one of the ways we can talk about is to productionize this silver process, right? Then we can, and we're going to at least talk about it a little bit today. Another route is to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and say, nah, just go to gold right away because I want to be able to do feature engineering. I want to do aggregates right from the get-go, right? So provide us your feedback because that guides how Simon and I will continue to build our thing, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and start sharing. This time now, I'll share my screen. Okay, oops, sorry. And I'm going to share. Let's see if I can get the right one now. Aha! This is the, you should be able to see a Databricks notebook. I would like to confirm that that is what you're seeing, y'all.
Yep,
cool.
All looks good to me.
All right, perfect. Now, I'm actually going to go to our Lakey Thing Explorer just to give you some context real quick. All right. All right, so basically we have our bronze, silver, gold tables, and we also have an iron one that's just like, or pre-bronze, just in case you needed that. But the idea is that here's the bronze table, and if you open it up, and here's our ratings table inside bronze, it's just basically a bunch of Parquet files because the autoloader had loaded the data into it, and we have a Delta log, and we have schemas, which we're going to show you in a second. Okay. Now the schemas, people are wondering, well, what's the schemas thing? So you look at it, it actually doesn't look like much, but what it is actually is that when the autoloader processes your data, as it's bringing its data, it's actually going to define the schema, okay, right from the get-go. And so it puts that schema information in this underscore schemas folder. So just like in a Delta table has a Delta log, right? This is the log of what we did to this table, right? It also has, in this case, because the autoloader is involved, it also has a schemas and also has a checkpoint. Checkpoint is structured streaming, so we automatically put checkpoints into there. So if the streaming job fails, no problem. We can go back to the checkpoint, grab the most recent checkpoint, and figure out how to restart. The schemas is basically that's the context with an autoloader. Now, depending on how you configure your autoloader, for example, you can configure it where as soon as autoloader sees a failure in the process, a change in the schema, it'll fail right from the get-go. So what happens is that it'll put the initial schema 0, right, that it sees, and then once it sees the new schema, it'll actually put a number 1 in there, and it'll fail the job because then they'll say, hey, are you sure that's what you want, right? And if it is what you want, you just literally click on start again for autoloader, and it'll just start processing again, and it'll actually use the new schema as well. Okay, so now that's one way of doing it. The way we did it was we just simply configured as like, nah, just chuck it into rescue data column. And so the idea is like, no, just continue processing. Don't worry about it. So that's why you only see the 0 schema and nothing else, because we're just saying, no, the schema we start off is the schema we care about. If there's any new columns, just put in the rescue data column and we're good to go. Okay, so
and that's a good point from the. I don't know if you're kind of from the question we've had in Zoom is exactly that, right? So how do you keep the schema refreshed if unknown columns are appended to the end so that downstream systems know about the new columns? Now, in that case, the way we've done it, we've got rescue. So we're just dumping data into this rescue thing, and people can go trawling for it. You can write a query and say, hey, is this attribute in there? And if it finds the attribute, it'll bring it back. But no, it won't affect anything downstream. So we're building things in a very protected, safe way, right? It's not
correct.
Your downstream things aren't going to suddenly break because the data's different, but they're also not aware of it. It's keeping it there for people to go and analyze it and discuss it and figure out what they want to do with it, but it's not really going to be used, and it's not going to be optimized, right? If it's in rescue column, you're not going to get your transaction log stats on it. You can't write a Bloom filter index on it. It's not really. It's like a second class attribute hidden away somewhere.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But then, for example, that would be one of the examples of where during your silver process, pretend there is in fact a column you care about, right? Inside rescue data, then you can extract the column from that rescue data column, right? Basically, it's a bunch of key value pairs. So you grab the key value you care about from the JSON call, the rescue data column, and from there you create a new actual column in your silver table. And so then, exactly to Simon's point, then then you can apply your Bloom filters. You can do any optimizations, partitioning, whatever else that you need to do against your data automatically, right? And so that's that context of data quality, of a data quality framework. That's why we talk about the bronze, silver, gold, because the whole premise is to say that, okay, bronze is just to make it easy for you to dump the data in, but if you don't want the system to break as you're productionizing, okay, well then just chuck everything to underscore rescue data and you go on your merry way, right? Now, for some environments, they're going to say, no, actually I want the system to fail. And so you configure Autoloader to basically say, okay, if there's a schema change, I want you to stop. And then, yes, you go ahead and look at the data, validate that this new schema is exactly what you want, let the Autoloader restart again, and boom, it'll automatically go ahead and take on that new column and put it in. So you get to have your cake and eat it too in this particular scenario, but you can't do it all at once. In other words, you can't have it just like it magically know, yes, in this case, you should optimize the schema, or in this case, you don't, unless you code it, right? If you were to code it, that's one thing, but that's the whole, more or less the context. When it comes to these types of schema changes, you're not really going to know until it happens, because just like with the OMDB API that we were loading this in, we don't control it. We don't know the source system at all, right? So it will decide if it wants to add a bunch of additional columns, and we don't want, at least in Simon and my case, we don't want our system to fail just because OMDB decided to add some new columns to there. Okay.
I mean, we have enough reasons why the thing we build is going to break. We don't need to add more ones to it.
Exactly. Yeah. Between Simon and I, we have half a developer, right? So. Okay, so we have our silver table. There's nothing in there, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so there you go. Boom. All right, now let's go ahead and go to our notebook. So on to silver, and so I already more or less showed the same information here. So basically, I'm saying here's what the lake looks like, which basically I just showed it to you from the Azure portal. Now I'm just showing you from Databricks. Same concept. You have your bronze, gold, iron, silver, your ratings, and just like I said, same thing. Your Parquet files, your Delta log, your schemas, your checkpoint. Okay, now what does a stream processing engine do, and what does that relate to Autoloader? Okay, so remember, we alluded to this a little bit, so I'm just going to provide a little extra context because so you can see some of what's going on with the file system. Well, when you're doing a stream processing, especially within the context of something like Autoloader, right? You want to actually have exactly once semantics or exactly once guarantees. Okay, and what I mean by that is that once the data comes in, you want to process it only once. And you want it to be guaranteed that you only process it once. And you also want to guarantee that every single bit of data, every single file that came in is processed only once, right? So in conceptually, that's an easy thing to do, but in reality and for productionizing the system, it's actually pretty hard. So because if, for example, I'm processing the data, so these little blocks that you see here are examples of data, okay? This is my version of color coding, okay? All right, which files were processed? Like in other words, the green one. Which files had failed and then need to be reprocessed, which is like this red one where we try to process, it failed, and now we're going to try to reprocess it again. And for the color red, green color deficient, this is actually green, red, green. I apologize. I'm actually red, green color deficient, so I was having a hard time seeing my own diagram, but that's me. All right, and then or for that matter, which were just successfully processed right from the get-go, like this yellow one here, or which files have not even been processed yet, like this blue one here. Okay, and the important thing for calling this out is because there needs to be a lot of metadata to keep track of all this. Okay, to keep track of what was processed, what was not processed. And so, oh, by the way, this is a shameless plug. It's a link to the source of this image is from Delta Lake, the Definitive Guide. And if you were to click on this link, like I'm about to right now, you can go to this page, which allows you to get an early preview of Delta Lake Definitive Guide. So by all means,
I was going to set you up naturally. I was going to say, oh, what's Delta Lake Definitive Guide? What's that, Denny? Can you tell us more about that? But no, off you go. Do your own plug. It's fine.
Well, yes, but I am American. I am an American, so I have to be a little bit more obnoxious about it. You have to admit that, right? Oh, I'm not like you British where you're nice and polite about it all, right? So, anyway,
blowing one's own trumpet. What?
Actually, you're good point taken. Okay, touche. But anyways, all right. So, nevertheless, please go ahead and download the early release of the. Now, mind you, there are only two or three chapters in the book so far, but we obviously are adding more. It's early release, and this is where you get to also beat up myself and TD and Vinny for our writing too. So it's a great combo. And so just to finish, though, a little bit of context, this will run for about 3 or 4 more minutes. This is the Delta log now contains that transaction log we've talked about many times before. So that way, and I'll show you and describe history so that it looks a little bit easier, but these are the files that contain the transactions themselves of that are happen to our bronze table. So this is not a new bronze table. We've actually, in testing our code, because we actually tested for once, we actually ran it a couple times, so we'll show you that in history. Like I said before, we have like a checkpoint. There's a bunch of metadata here, the commits, the metadata, the offsets, the sources. So just to take a look real quick on like the commits, for example, see, this tells you like every commit that actually happened to that particular Delta table as it's being processed. There isn't that much information because the amount of data that we had was relatively small, so Autoloader just did it basically one transaction, so it wasn't that big deal. Same idea with the offsets. So in other words, if it needs to know when new data is coming in or how much has been processed or not has been processed, you can tell the offsets. So there's a whole bunch of metadata, okay, that's stored inside here, like the benchmark, the batch watermarks, the timestamps, what was being processed, the state format, things of all that stuff is stored inside this data as metadata inside the offsets. And same thing with the sources. There's a bunch of interesting information inside here, metadata and all that other stuff. But key call out, there's also RocksDB. And so the call out that I wanted to just is that with Autoloader underneath the cover, in order for us to maintain deletion, tracking versus insertion versus whatever else, all the tracking of all the different files, because as we alluded to last week, whenever the last session was we had, Autoloader actually is able to keep track of all the files because what Autoloader does is it doesn't actually try to list all the files in the file system, right? Because if you have a large system and you're trying to list all your files, that can be extremely slow, especially for cloud object stores. So instead, there's actually an event that's triggered on S3, on Azure Blob Storage, on Google Cloud Storage, where basically it emits an event, a notification every time a new file goes in. So what we do is Autoloader keeps track of that information and it shows it into RocksDB in this case to be able to track all that info, right? And so that way we know what files have been processed and what files have not been processed yet. Okay. So
we just had one question in through YouTube.
Oh, shoot. Sure.
So saying, so each transaction would be a separate JSON file in bronze. I just want to make sure that's kind of super clear in that. So yeah, each time Autoloader runs, so each time there is a transaction of putting data into that Delta table in bronze, yeah, you'll see a JSON transaction file, but that's not the data. So there'll be new Parquet files, and there might be 1, there might be 10, there might be 20, depends on our cluster size, how much data we're doing, how many files we had and processed, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, you'd see one transaction log file. So hopefully that clears up that question.
No, thanks a lot, Simon. And actually, I took the opportunity. Let me check in LinkedIn. So there's a question, for example, do we keep the whole schema or just the new columns that are added? In the case of Autoloader, when you saw that 0 for schema under the underscore schemas, the whole schema is kept. So anytime there's an additional new schema, the entire schema is kept there. So we can actually do a comparison between what the old schema looked like and what the new schema looked like. In terms of changing column types, as a follow-up to that question, the thing about changing column types is that in the case of Autoloader, it automatically puts everything a string. It'll actually become obvious when we show this later on. The reason why is because we're talking about JSON, and it's just safer that we save everything as string, so that way it can get stored right from the get-go. Now, some people may disagree with that, but from an Autoloader perspective, where you basically are trying to oversimplify everything, the safest way is basically to keep everything in string. Now that you keep it in string, though, we'll show this actually to you in today's notebook. When we go to Silver, we're going to convert those columns from string to their appropriate column. Now, we're going to do it slightly more simplistic with using SQL in our particular example, but like whether you want to use Scala, Python, or anything else, as you're productionizing the system, that's completely cool. We can also talk about Delta Live Tables at a later date if you want to, in terms of how it does that. But the point being is that you let this system, your pipeline itself is the one that'll actually take care of that conversion. You don't want the Autoloader dumping into bronze being the one that does that. That's the real call out. Okay.
I mean, generally in all these kind of systems, right? You try and abstract away when you have to go back to the source system. So if you think about it, kind of getting data into your lake, you don't want to be rejecting data on its way into your lake, because then you have to reach back out of your lake to go and get it. So by saying just let anything into bronze, just get anything into your bronze layer. And then you've got the luxury to reject stuff and throw stuff out and say, no, that's not right, as you're trying to move into your silver layer. But then you only have to go back to your raw layer. It's inside your sphere of influence. You talk about, kind of domains of control in terms of architecture, because we're doing it between layers of the lake. That's in our control, and we can go back and fix things in raw. We can go back and play around with data. We can go and reject things at our leisure. I'll try and keep my judgy face back for your SQL-based stuff, but
So, there's another question I forgot to answer that was from LinkedIn as well, which is, could you talk a little about schemas dynamically changing? So there's two components about dynamically changing schemas. There's the component that's Autoloader specific, and there's the component that's Delta specific. Okay. Now, we already discussed more or less about the Autoloader stuff, but as just a 30-second recap, the idea is that you can configure Autoloader to either fail its job, or for it to automatically dump any new schemas, any new columns that it sees into into like basically a new column underscore rescued underscore data column. Okay, so that's an oversimplification, but rewind and then they'll have the longer version. As noted also, though, because we're using Autoloader, it'll automatically put everything in string, because that'll do it safely. Now, to exactly as Simon called out, we're also going to, as we're running our pipeline, we're going to make changes to our schema there. So, for example, let's just say we already have an existing silver table. In our example that we're doing today, we don't have an existing silver table. Pretend we already have one, and we want to change the schema in that. So if our pipeline tries to add a new column to a silver table, Delta automatically will say, no way. It'll just say, no, you're not allowed putting that new column in there, because that we want to protect the schema of the system. That's this context of within Delta Lake schema enforcement. We want to enforce a schema that says, okay, hey, you're trying to convert this column from an int to a double, or you're trying to add a new column. Nope, you're not allowed doing it, right? So that way your data is consistent. Your data schema is exactly what you want, right? So that's the concept of schema enforcement. If you, on the other hand, you want to change the schema of this table. For example, I want to add a new column because for new business requirements, common enough occurrence, not a big deal. then you can literally change there's an option which basically says schema merge. You set that to true, merge schema. When you set that to true, then bam, you can then have Delta say, okay, in this one particular case, I'm going to let the column be added to my table, and my new schema in my table is now with this additional column, okay? And so underneath the covers within Delta Lake itself, just like you saw with the JSON transaction files that we had showcased before, the inside the transaction log, we actually track the schema of your table. So now the silver table that version 3 of the table had 4 columns. Now the 4th table has 5 columns. So you can look at the versions of the table and can tell, okay, version 5 has the 5 columns, version 4 has the 4 columns. And so you can go back in time and figure out exactly what happened to your table. So that way there is ACID transactional protection around not just the data, but also the schema of your table. Okay,
and
so hopefully
super quick note on that.
Please.
So as you're saying, Denny, you can turn that on. You can turn on schema merge for a Delta table specifically when you're doing it. So you can do that as a single transaction. For this one, turn it on. You can do it just when you create the table, and actually just always merge into it. Or you can turn it on in cluster mode, and just it'll always merge schema, which is what I like to know as chaos mode, of just throw data and it'll just figure things out. But you can choose how flexible you want it to be across that stack, right?
That's fair. That's fair. I just did not. This is my judgmental face talking about. I would prefer not chaos mode. That's all. But fair enough.
Got to give people the options.
Oh, fair. My bad. Okay. All right. Let's go build our table now. So remember, up to this point, we've been still talking about files, and everybody's going like, "Where's the table?" So okay, so let's go build the table. So we're just creating our table right now. So we're going to call bronze thingy because this is on brand for Simon and myself. We're going to call out that's using Delta, and the location is that Mount Lake Bronze ratings, the one we showed before. Okay, and so if I was to describe history, like I said, we're guilty of the fact that we ran this multiple times. So the initial load that Simon had pushed in the data in, that's the streaming update that you have here, okay? And then I did a bunch of things, but we're gonna pretend none of this happened, okay? But because I ran a delete and then I restored it, I ran a delete and then I restored it, okay? But just to make sure the code worked, okay? But so the point is that the whole context is that I wanted to call out is that what's so cool is that if I screwed it up and I didn't mean to delete, I can actually literally just run a restore operation to get the original table back. So it's pretty nice. Okay. So anyways, so here's what our table looks like. So and right now I'm running everything SQL. It's a Python notebook, so I just do %SQL. But here is what this table looks like. It has multiple columns in terms of the OMDB Open Movie Database. Select your actors, the awards. I'm amazed that Bird Notice hasn't won any awards. This is one of my shows that I like. There's the poster information, the ratings information when it was released, and so forth and so forth. All the stuff's basically propped here. So yay, okay, cool. All right, now, let's talk about the bronze and silver. So these are 3 of many things we could be doing as from our bronze to silver. Okay. Now, the fact is you could do a heck of a lot more. We just wanted to show some quick examples to provide some context. That's all this really is. So for example, we want to reject any bad data. Okay. Or we want to clean up the column values and we want to be able to audit the data. So we're just going to show you some quick SQL statements to do that. And so I'm not be able to, since I'm doing this right now live, I'm not going to be able to really monitor LinkedIn as well, or YouTube as well. So I'll make sure to look at them at the end. But please continue chiming in with your questions, okay? So I'm going to arbitrarily say that to reject our bad data, delete our MDB votes, anything that's less than 50. Now, that was very arbitrary, by the way, okay? I'm not pretending that actually is a good idea. I'm just saying, I arbitrarily decided to say that bad data is that any data that's less than 50. Now, you could either select that out. Shoot.
At this point, kind of, so I we'll hold our hands up. I hadn't done that much prep. I looked at this notebook, half an hour before this session. That shocked me, honestly. I was like, wait, what? And I forgot to mention to you, I thought I should accidentally able to know. So rejecting data in terms of how we approach it, right? So you got your raw data, and we would always reject on the way into Silver and just remove it we wouldn't put it into Silver, but we'd always leave it in raw or like bronze to Silver. So deleting it, going back and changing raw and deleting it is like cardinal sin for how we build lakes. So I'm just interested, is that kind of just from a demo point of view, or do you see people going and doing that and actually going, you know what, we're never going to need this, let's throw it away from that kind of entry layer, bronze layer?
Actually, that's precisely why I put this in here. So, and
just to hurt me, to shock me.
No, not to hurt you, to bring up this discussion point, right? Yeah. It would have been better if we actually prepared better than 30 minutes before the session. Right. Now, I actually agree with Simon that you should not be deleting data from your bronze table. Okay, you should not do that. What we should have done is actually do a select from. So in other words, I could have just, in this next one, I could have just updated to say select star all these columns from where IMDb votes is greater than equal to 50. So that's actually if I want to do it the right way, I would do it that way. Okay, like this.
Okay. I can breathe easy. I'll be all right now. And certainly, if we do another session and look at, kind of how would we do that as a production thing? Yes, so certainly that kind of, you've got SQL logic to say, here's the columns I want and here's the transformations. And then a separate thing underneath, take that as a data frame in PySpark rather than SQL and go apply a filter and maybe keep them. Maybe take those rows and put them into a rejected table, put them somewhere else. Go, this is my quarantine of bad stuff. But yeah, kind of doing it, kind of just fork the data stream and put them in different places. Yeah. But no, makes absolute sense.
So exactly. So that's the idea of us saying maybe we're quarantining the data as opposed to outright deletion. Now, the only reason I felt that I could get away with doing something as silly as actually deleting from my bronze table is because, like I said before, I've done it multiple times, in fact. So I deleted it, but then I restored it because I realized it was silly. And then I deleted it again just to make sure the code worked, but then I restored it because I'm being silly. So exactly.
Two wrongs make a right if you can restore it?
No, I mean, okay, for demo purposes, yes, but for production purposes, absolutely not. Okay, so because we're not going to go do this, let's just comment it out. Okay, what do you think? You want me to just comment it out?
Yes, please.
Well, comment it out. Okay, so we won't do that, but what we are going to do is we're going to simply say, I want to be able to remember I had called out that basically it's all string, right? So this is just me going ahead and showing you the print schema. So string. And actually, if I brought up the autoloader description, they'll explain to you same idea, exactly what we talked about before, that everything's string just because it's a lot easier for us to ensure that we can save that. Now, that's bad because we actually want, when we get to Silver at a minimum, to have the right schema, right? And so in this case, I'm doing a very simple thing, which is basically taking the columns I want. So I'm not taking all the columns. Some of the columns would be like, okay, I want to cast the episode as integer, right? Cast the Metascore as integer. The release date is date, and so forth and so forth, right? I also did a little bit of a change here, which is basically it had 44 minutes. And I just, for example, for time, and I just want 44 because that way I can compare durations nicely and so forth and so forth. Okay. So this is what the data looks like now with the SQL query, with the correct way of actually processing the data as opposed to deleting from the bronze. Okay. So that way Simon won't have a heart attack anymore. So right now, so far, there is no new schema changes. I'm pretty sure, I think we made it in the last time we did do one. We inserted like 1 or 2 rows, I think, and so near the tail end, you'll see a schema change there because we actually just modified just for the fun of it. Okay, all right. But here's all the information now. All right, so far so good. Okay, so now we want to do the same thing, but this is what our Silver table is going to look like. So now again, this is hardly a production style setup. Okay, but basically, I'm now going to create my Silver table, which basically I've filtered out any data that I could deemed as bad. There's my where clause right there, okay? Right? I've also changed the schema as appropriate, and I'm putting the data into the Silver ratings table. And remember, we have nothing in silver right now so far. Okay, so no, it doesn't exist. Okay, so we're going to go run it. So hopefully this works. This is what happens when we do live demos. Okay. And oh, there you go. Compute snapshot version. So 0, boom. So it's okay. There's no result. So it looks like there's a table there. Let me go ahead and let's see. And then I go silver and bam, voila. There in fact is the Parquet files associated to our Delta table or our silver table. And the Delta lock only has one transaction, the 0th transaction, because that's the initial insert. So there you go. Bam, we're done. So we can take a look at our silver table, right? And right there you go. All the information we cared about with the schema that we wanted. So far so good. We're pretty happy about that. It's in slightly different order. So we're actually seeing Game of Thrones first instead of Burn Notice. That's not a big deal. Mind you, I think we probably should have filtered out Game of Thrones season 8. We probably should have done that. But anyways, sorry.
I think there's a rule that has to be applied there. Yeah, the good taste rule.
We're gonna have to do that. Sorry. Technically, even season 7, but well, it is what it is. Okay. All right. So this I'm showing the described history. I'm going to talk about it in a second because in a second about auditing, because that's actually why. Remember, we want to be able to audit what the heck is going on. Okay. So, but before that, remember, I was being silly and I wanted to delete it. I wanted to delete my tables. This is the statement that when I was deleting the data from my bronze table, which was again a bad idea. But I realized it was a bad idea. So in order to restore back to the 0th table, then yes, I just run the same restore table bronze thing to version as of 0, and then we're good to go. And from our YouTube channel, that's correct. Seasons less than equal to season 7. That's fair. I will not debate that one at all. Okay. All right. So, but what's interesting here is that from an auditing perspective, you actually don't need to add rows. For example, often in your pipelines, what you have to do is like, I'll run an extra query that says, okay, what's my select, for sake of argument like this. Again, we're going to do this live, right? Select count silver thingy, right? And then I'll do the same thing like as for my bronze thingy, right? And then I want to record all this information so I can audit the fact that that's what I'm doing, right? So that's great. Except what's great about Delta is that information is actually kept inside your inside the history, the operational parameters and the operational metrics. So for example, the operation here is the create table select as. So that's exactly what we were expecting, right? Which is when we create the silver table here, right? With the statement up here, that's what we're doing. That's what's being called out here in the operation. But if and it tells you like the parameters that were used, also which notebook was used. But here's the good stuff: the operation metrics. So the number of files created, the 16 files, and the bytes. So for example, if I was to just look at this here, here's your 16 files, and here's the bytes associated. So that information is already kept in the operation metrics. As well, the number of rows output, 10,745, right? Exactly like the count. I don't actually need to do additional queries or store this additionally to somewhere else. The table transaction log itself contains that information for me. And the exact same thing happens even for the bronze thingy, right? So for example, when I was restoring the table after screwing it up by deleting it, the number of files were restored, the removed file size, the number of removed files, restored files, number, all that information is stored here. And also when I was silly and I did the actual deletion, all the information that happened. Like, so don't forget when you're working within Delta, when we're deleting files, deleting rows from a table, what you're doing is you're actually inserting underneath the covers. You don't have to do this. You just wrote a delete statement. But underneath the covers, there's actually a new file that's added with only the rows that you need. And then the transaction log will tell you, okay, from this version onwards, only read these files. So the old files are still there. So that way you can time travel. We've talked about this before, where you can go into the past basically and see what different older versions of the table look like. But then the idea is that, okay, perfect. I can go ahead and get that listing. So because the actual file names are stored in the transaction log. That's cool because, again, same idea like we alluded to with the autoloader issue. I don't actually have to scan the files in my Cloud Object Store. I have a listing. So whether it's Spark or any other system that wants to read that Delta table, it could just read the transaction log. It's told what files exist, and then bam, it just goes ahead and grabs those files directly. So I don't have to list. And back to my point about deletion, yeah, number of removed files, any added files, copied rows, deleted rows, all this information is stored. So from an auditing perspective, all this information is stored directly into your transaction log. So you don't actually even have to do those extra steps. That info is actually stored directly in there. So hopefully that provides some context. Now, that's it actually really for this particular demo for today. In fact, actually, just because we wanted to show you from a high level, what are the steps that you can do? We already got some feedback from YouTube that we'd like to productionize it, so that we can certainly go down that route. And we'd love to go ahead and get your feedback on any of the other issues or questions that you might want to add to it as well. Simon, anything else that I think? Yeah.
I was gonna say we can spend like sort of a quick 5-10 minutes talking about how we would go about productionizing this, and then if people want us to then go ahead and do that, we can do that. If people are like, all right, that sounds boring, you guys do something else next time, then we'll do that instead.
Okay. All right, sure. Then why don't we do that? Want me to stop sharing the screen, or do you want me to keep the share screen?
Oh yeah. I can. We can go into. If you want more scribble, I can go into whiteboard mode and talk about how we change that around.
Let's do that. Oh, damn.
Can you tell that this is just how I spend all day every day, just scribbling on a whiteboard?
I am not about to judge you on that, man.
I mean, not for work, just how I entertain myself. Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
There we go. Okay. So we've got essentially, so we've got our raw bronze autopilot. So we've got our bronze files in the lake, right? So that's sitting there like this. Just move that down a bit. And then on top of that, we've got a table. So we said there's a SQL table we've put, which is what we're using here. So in our example, we said we're going to write a bit of SQL on top of that. I'm going to use that, and we're going to write into a new Silver Lake. It's essentially kind of that's that notebook that we just looked at is doing run this one bit of SQL and then just kind of push it into there. Now, some of the things that we'd need to fix in terms of how that's working is, so from that notebook, it's doing a create table as select, right? So that's as it currently stands, that kind of.
Yeah, that for this demo, that's exactly what we're doing. But enough in production, we're probably not going to do that. That's fair.
No. So we need to think about, how we go about, and rather than like drop and recreate the table inside, saying take everything from one and overwrite it, which is going to be like loads of compute and really hard, really awkward. We need to think about how we make that an incremental update. So do we look at is that going to be a merge? Do we look at building other ways of access, just only tell me what's changed? And then if we're saying only tell me what's changed, does that mean actually rather than running a SQL statement to do that, do we want to do that via, we could do that as a Delta stream, in which case the same way we've got Autoloader working, which is kind of doing this memory of these are the files I've read, these are the files I haven't read from landing and pulling it through. If we're doing Delta streaming, that's working on the Delta transaction level. So essentially we've got our transaction logs that are in bronze. So we know kind of, version 1, 2, 3 of our bronze layer. And we've got our kind of, if we're doing streaming, we'd have a checkpoint over here as well that says I've read up to version 2. And then when we run this, it goes, okay, I'm on version 2. What's over here? Oh, there's version 3. And then it knows it only needs to pull over the files that pertain to version 3, 2, upwards of 2. So if I had version 3, if I had versions 4, 5, 6, 7, just give me all that stuff and then pull over it as a stream. That's one way we can do it. So there's a few different mechanisms that we can use, whether we want to continue the autoloaders kind of streaming hops and have it kind of self-managing, whether we want to have like the SQL query, have something just saying, we've decorated the rows in bronze with like the file name. We could have a last updated and just do it, where last updated is greater than, this kind of date. And we can just filter it in SQL style. And then we have to keep track somewhere of what was the last date that we came from. There's loads of different ways we can build that mechanism to say, what has changed over here that we need to pull into it? And there's a few different mechanisms we can use over here saying, how do we insert that into Silver? Is it just a straight append? Do we have to update records? Do we need to merge? Do we need to do a partition switch? We could do replace where and just say, get rid of that day, insert a new one, get rid of that existing series, season 8, and put in a new one. There's different ways that we can do this depending on requirements, right? Depending on what's the neatest way to do. The problem, or it's not a massive problem, is a lot of doing it this way means we're switching from SQL to PySpark or Scala, or it means we're writing it as a reusable program. Now that, I think for a lot of people going, kind of from we're now switched. We're now talking about writing a bit of SQL to clean something up to writing a program to clean things for us automatically. Now, it's a conversation we have with clients all the time, right? It's kind of, I'm switching from working in a nice, very, very familiar route. I've already got loads of SQL. I've already got a load of scripts to clean my data. Why would I want to switch? And it comes, at the moment, we're talking about one table, right? We're saying, I've got my ratings table, and I'll move it to a cleaned ratings table. I might as well just write it in SQL. And it comes down to, when we're saying, actually, I've got loads and loads and loads and loads of different things sitting in raw. I've got hundreds of different tables in my bronze layer, and I've got 100 different silver tables that I want to clean. And even writing in SQL, I'll have to write a SQL notebook for each of them. It becomes very, very tied to, I'm writing a whole bit of code for each thing that I'm trying to achieve. Whereas if we go, actually, you know what? I'm going to write something super generic. I'm going to write one bit of Python that says, take from any of these tables and spit to any of the relevant tables. Yeah, it's more complex, but I've got one thing to maintain rather than loads of different things to maintain. So we're talking about how we'd productionize that kind of workload. The SQL tasks that we're doing exactly the same. We're dealing with, we're applying some data types to stuff. We're using a filter criteria, which is probably expressed as a SQL statement. We're doing these same jobs. The mechanisms are the same, but just we'd wrap it and use a couple of different kind of data frame based things to make it generic, to make it metadata driven, to make it one script fits all is kind of how we'd then take that process and productionize it, essentially. Or I'll draw a spider, and that's it.
Wow, that spider has some really weird feet.
Yeah, it's wearing boots. It's cold outside.
Oh, fair enough. Point taken. And exactly to Simon's point here. I mean, that's part of, even though we start off with SQL, that's part of the reason why also during Summit we announced the public preview of Delta Live tables. Right. The idea was that there's a lot of these things like the checkpointing that's going on underneath that you don't want to track, and you want to be able to track when you want it, but you don't really want to think about it. You want the governance, you want development environment, independence, all of these other things. And so the great thing about Delta Live tables is to take that like SQL code, for example, that you have, and you can actually apply it as a pipeline. Now, saying that, whether you do it Delta Live table mechanism or you do it exactly with the PySpark mechanism or Scala, as Simon's called out, honestly, that's your preference. It's not so much more about like, is one better or the other, right? They underneath the covers, we're still using Scala data frames with Spark in our particular set of examples anyways. And so that means you're using the data frames API. So whether you're writing in SQL, you're writing in PySpark, you're writing in Scala, it's pretty much exactly the same, especially for Apache Spark 3.0. The only major difference is when you're using Python UDFs. And if you're writing pandas UDFs or vectorized UDFs, then you still get the performance gains that you want anyway. So the reality is it's less about what language to prefer, but more about exactly what Simon's talking about, which is the need to productionize your systems, to understand there will be issues like file changes, checkpoints underneath the covers. When you want to maintain your code, you don't want 500 scripts to maintain, right? You would much rather go ahead and have one script that maybe refers to some metadata that you store to be able to, so that way you only need to maintain this one thing. Yes, it's an additional level of abstraction that you'd have to maintain, and that means you have to write code. Yeah, but at this exact same time, it allows you to maintain only one system as opposed to maintaining multiple systems. The example here, just as Simon noted, this is just a really cool or quick way for us to showcase it. That's all this is, right? You should not go into production like this, especially the deletion part.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I gave you a hard time about it, but
No. Again, that's why we do these things live. We can discuss these things in an honest manner and also rib each other at the exact same time. So it's a double benefit. So we're good. And I'm more than sure I deserve more than my fair share right now. So we're good, dude.
I mean, to be fair, your code worked, unlike the one last time I tried to do a demo, which it all failed complete. So that's fine.
Yes, but that, of course, don't forget that had to do with the fact that we arbitrarily set the cluster to 20 minutes, and we also arbitrarily set the security token to only last a day or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I was like, I only did this for a day when I set it up the day before.
Yeah.
No.
So a million enough. So fair enough, right? And so, anyways, I think that actually covers pretty much everything that we had to cover for today. So anything else you want to add, Simon, before we flip it back to Karen?
No, I'd say that's, generally put it out to people. What should we do next? And that kind of the choices sound like it's, I don't know if we've got a poll ready to go. Should I ask people?
I don't think we do, because I think
we should ask people.
Yeah, we just ask people. Yeah. Just email us, Slack us. Don't forget this the Delta Lake Slack channel. Just join there and just go ahead and bug us.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people on LinkedIn too. So unfortunately, we're not able to do a poll there, but that's easy. I have both your names tagged in the post of this tech talk. So hopefully you will ping them and ask them what you'd like to hear about next.
And this is where Simon and I change our names. But anyways.
I'm also unreachable for the next 3 weeks, so I'm just going to just quietly just disappear.
Dang it, that's right. You did pull that off already. Dang it. All right, Karen, why don't you take it away in that case?
All right.
I think we're good to go.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Denny and Simon. Great session. And thanks everyone for joining and asking your questions and making this series what's awesome about it by asking questions and being interactive. So with that, we'll probably work on scheduling the part 4, maybe in the next month or so after everyone's back from vacation. I'm getting kind of nods from both of them. So, all right. Well, sounds good. With that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and thanks for joining. All right. Take care.
Awesome, folks. Cheers all.
Take care.